kind of keeping in the theme of this this Junkyard ATV, we're going to look at the front brakes. And here's the idea behind this. So this video is going to be fixing and repairing the front brakes on this blaster. There are no rear brakes, as is so commonly the case, but this is not a video where we're going to tear it down. We're going to get all new pieces, brand new, replace everything. We're going to work with what we have. We are going to tear down the brakes and we're going to make it work the best we can with what we have. We're not going to replace everything brand new. We're going to end up, I suspect, doing things like deglazing the shoes inside on. All right, so this video is a little different, kind of in keeping with the theme of this Junkyard ATV. In this case, it's a Yamaha blaster. It has front brakes, cable pull brakes, no rear brakes, but the brakes don't work. So rather than a video where I tear it down and we basically do everything brand new, we're going to work with what we have in front of us. How good can we make these brakes work without spending money and investing to improve it? Kind of the idea is that you have what you have. You've got an hour on a Saturday afternoon to get your kids' quad running, your friends' quad running, and there's no money for it, but you want to get back out on the trail. This is going to be the video for you there. So here's what we have. A little ugly without the plastics on it, but this is a Yamaha blaster, and if you're unfamiliar with it, well, there's one there. There's another one there. It's a two-stroke ATV, fairly common in this one not to have rear brakes. The original first gen was a cable pull, and you'll be hard pressed to find a first gen Yamaha blaster with rear brakes. But this process we're going to go through, many ATVs, especially the older generation ATVs, have this same setup, a cable pull front brake through a Y harness that have some springs that take the tension back off when you're not braking, and then some adjustments that are actually on the brake housing themselves. We're going to go through all of that, how to adjust individually, how to adjust them both at the same time, how to clean them, get that bite and grab so you can get back out and riding on the trail without spending a bunch of bucks. To start this conversation, let's look at what we're working with. So I'm up on a jack stand, spinning. Let me get these going. Pull our brake lever. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put a clamp on here, and then we're going to see what kind of grip we have without doing anything. See if that holds. So I've just fully clamped the brake. I'm trying to stop on the trail. What are things like here? We're not spinning, but that's not stopping you. Other one, this one is almost spinning. So starting our day with the brake fully clamped down. This one here, almost spinning. This one I got to put a little more into it. A little more grip. But that'll never stop you on the trail. So first thing we could do about that, we have 3 adjustment points on here. First, you see this one here. This one is going to adjust the cable play off of the center Y harness, which runs the cable down into each of the wheels. Now, if I turn this wheel, we could adjust each one independently by spinning this guy in. If you look at this one, this is spun all the way in. There is no more cable to take out, no more slack to take out on the brake on this side. I can't go any tighter on my front left. Springs all the way compressed. Now I have clamped it, so now I haven't. Now the spring isn't compressed, but I can't clamp in or spin in anymore. If I look at my other one, same thing all the way. There is no slack on either one of these for me to take up. The only place I might have still some adjustment is up here, and even I'm already a finger width out, and I've only got 2 or 3 turns on this, and then this is just falling off. There is no more. So these brakes are adjusted as they sit as far out as they can go. Recognizing that, the first place your mind goes is that your brake shoes are worn, your pads are worn, you're going to have to replace those. That's what we're going to do next. We're going to get in here, we're going to take a look at those. And let's see, because there are some adjustments we can do to take up slack on the actual brake housings themselves. So we're going to take the front wheels off. So we have just the hub sitting there, and we're going to take all of the tension back off of the cable, which is to say here, we're going to end up getting all of the play back in this cable, because the effort's going to be, can we take out tension and reset what I'll call neutral here so that we have all that tension fresh to take out. Let me take these wheels off and I'll get back with you. So with the wheels off on both sides, you can see a better angle here. And you notice this has been clamped down so tightly that it's spinning the whole nut in there. So I'm gonna have to get a grip on that, loosen this out. I've taken all the slack out here on the cable. So now I'm gonna come through, grab these, take all the slack out, because it's gonna release, in theory, release the shoes in here so they're smaller so the hubs can come off. Chances are these hubs will not want to come off if I leave that tension on here, especially if they have real grooves worn in. There'll almost be a channel in here, and this would be a real pain to come off. So I'm hoping that's not the case once I take the tension off. You can see this should have a half moon so it doesn't spin. The tension sits there, and it's pretty flattened out just how hard it was cranked in. But I'm really just setting this basically down to the end, taking all that off, and in theory, I did pull the cotter pin out of here, but in theory, I should be able to get this. There it is. Okay. There's our first look inside. Running my finger in, there's a bit of a channel. It's not too bad, but you can see just how shiny glazed that is. Seeing that reflection on there? Those pads really don't have anything to grip against. That's just buffed shiny. We're gonna get that cleaned out with sandpaper, probably some 60-80 grit, so that the pads can actually bite on something. There's the first big thing we can do there. Now we have our next opportunity, and we get a chance to actually look at the pad. It's so dirty, it's hard to see how worn these are, but you can immediately see just how caked this is in. This should look like stone rough. This lobe here, when you pull the brakes, this twists, and this twisting motion when you pull the cable is what expands the shoes in and out. So right now it's in a neutral position, and we can just fold these right off. We just don't want the springs popping out and get us. And we're gonna clean the heck out of these so we can inspect them. And I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll look back. And we have the same situation on this side. These pads are just really not looking good, just no bite. And if I look in this one as well, same thing, just absolutely just glossed over. Sandpaper is going to make a world of difference on both of these. All right, here's the tools we're using today. I've got a piece of sandpaper, that's a 220. That's a 100. Nothing fancy, drywall actually. A pretty dirty Brillo pad and a wire brush. And really, I'm gonna start just getting into this, getting all the loose stuff off so we can get down to understand what's still good in here. This is just going to get off the loose caked in mud. And we're going to have some work to do in here with some rough sandpaper. With the Brillo, I'm just getting in, get a little deeper than with my brush. Now down here, I've just wrapped the shaft in a paper towel or a shop rag while I try to get a little bit off, basically just the loose stuff off the inner part of the hub. Could take this off. I'm doing the trail cleaning today. All of the debris you get off here is debris that's not going to get re-caked up in your brake shoes. I'm trying to be a little careful. This bearing is stuck on here. This could use more care. I will end up re-greasing. So we'll clean off this old grease because that bearing is not a sealed bearing. So we're going to want to pack a waterproof grease in there as best we can when we go to put this back together. And this shaft also a little tough with old kind of cake on. Probably hurting a little bit on how freely your wheels spin. While I'm in here, I'm going to point out a few things. There's a chunk broken, a chunk broken, a chunk broken. Often when I see that, it's because people have not let the tension off on the pads so that or shoes, so they're all the way in, so your hubs, your brake hub housing slides off, and people are getting flathead screwdrivers in here and trying to press things out, and this just snaps right off. But when I see these little missing pieces, that's typically what I see, is that the tension wasn't let off on the bars or down here for the shoes to contract. So for the field fix, we're going to end up greasing. Now, loose stuff is out of here. Now I have to remember there still is a bearing and a seal in here. It's grainy, but again, we're not going for perfection. We're going to try and get back on the trail, so we're going to do some grease packing and move on. We want to rough this up, and I can feel the lip in there. And to rough it up, I've got 100 grit. And that's what we're going to do. Quite literally, we're just working to take the glaze off the inside there. So I'm going to work a little bit on this one. I'll get back to you. For the pad as well, I'm hand sanding here. Taking that glaze off. Just give you a nice, I think you can probably see in the light just how shiny a lot of that is. And there we go. That's with the 100 grit. That's what I had lying around. I didn't use the 220. I want to stay nice and rough here. Taking the glaze off. Now, having cleaned up the hubs that are on the chassis, having cleaned up the outer brake hub component, cleaned up the pads, knocked off all the loose debris, loose rust, sanded with 100 grit inside and on the pads so we have some bite back. We could just put them back on the quad and then readjust our cables back in. Get our hands on some grease, grease up the bearings in here. Make sure that the grease does not get on the pads. You're just going to undo the work you just did. Put things back together. But one thing that we know here is that we were really all the way tuned in for all the slack, top and bottom, which means this cable is likely stretched. Here's the secret tuning opportunity that not a lot of folks do. And if you don't want to replace a stretched cable, down here. So showing on this side here, you've got a 10 mil. If you take this out, there are splines here where this arm sits. And let's see if you're able to, let me get in closer. You see down here under my finger, this is a wear measurement. So all the way in, there is an indicator arrow built into the arm here, pointing at the little mark at the end of my fingertip, which means brand new pad. In other words, this is all the way out. And once this is adjusted and you're setting at neutral and it is all the way in, if you can see that arrow moving, that's a worn pad. What we can do is loosen this and move by one spline only to the outside. That will take up slack in the cable. And that right there will change the game. So first, you got to clean this all up, kind of take care of it, because everything glazed through mud, water, everything, you lose everything. And you keep trying to take all that slack out of your cables. You can clamp on it, but it's like your brakes are greased. It's not working. So clean it all up so you have the friction. But then if you've got a 20-year-old ATV, and this is for any of these cable pulls, and there's lots of these out here, get in and go by one spline. But I have a curiosity, and I want to see what this can look like cleaned up. I have the bead blaster back there, and I want to put these hubs through, and I want to put one or two of these shoes through, just see what I can do with some glass bead cleaning up. Because I really do I've never done it before, so I want to see what that could look like. But ordinarily, that's not the trail fix. Before I do that, I do have to push out the seals and the bearings from those hubs so that they can be reused. I don't want to be blasting against the bearing that's in here and the seal. So I'm going to push those out carefully because they're going back in. Now this is actually really tough to look at. That bearing is behind the seal. There's no grease there. This really does, really needs bearings. We're going to clean it up and pack it with grease because we are working with what we have versus spending money on new. It'll be absolutely better packed with grease. You also shouldn't be reusing seals as they wear out. They're going to let dirt and debris in. This one is also quite worn. Just, oh boy. As much as we can salvage the brakes, we really should be putting new seals and new bearings in here, but we're not. Here's another example on the other side. This is why the maintenance is so important. Unbelievable there. Now here's what I'm concerned at. I was gonna pop the bearings out so that I could do a blast on these hubs, see how clean they'd look. I am fairly confident these bearings are fused into the hubs and that I will finish destroying them. Well, they're already, these are not good, but I would finish them off trying to bang them out. Because the bearings go out this way, and looking at that lip with all the water and lack of care that's gone into this ATV over the years, I could press this out in a press. It's not going back in. Absolutely nasty. So this is why just doing basic maintenance, and you don't need the tools. I mean, you don't need to spend a lot of money on replacing things. Just time to time, take things apart, re-grease, clean the crud out. Great thing to do off season. The more you do it, the easier it is because there's less in there. Everything comes apart easy. Your bolts aren't all rusted up. So recognizing that, I'm not going to try and bead blast those hubs. Kind of too bad because those would look absolutely beautiful. But I have to get the bearings out to be able to do that. But I'm going to blast these springs and these pads just to see what they can look like. Well, this isn't something you do for the trail, but those rusty springs, that's nice to see. And some of this is learning for me, understanding what I can do with the media, planning for the future, for future builds. This one was really rusted, concerned me, and didn't come out as well. But also I am using, I'll show you here. I was just working with a finishing media. It's a number 13, a 220 to 240 grit glass bead. And there's the setup there. And the reason I don't have the screen, that guy down in there, is often I find I have to manually agitate to get everything to feed down into the gravity hopper. Gravity hopper is a huge improvement over the siphon tube, and I just have it cracked with a little bit of air, and I can see my media pulling up consistent. But that's a media that works very nice on aluminum. For example, this carb bowl, really nice. And you saw before this OEM carb, really cleaning that up. But what it isn't is it really isn't a cutting media. It really won't cut through rust with any kind of bite. So polishing, cleaning, yes, but you've got to start with pretty clean stuff. Here's the brake shoes. So on the right are the brake shoes that I did with the 100 grit sandpaper, and you see it's matte. We've taken a lot of the shine out. But right here, that finishing media, that feels pretty nice. So I am going to do these other two, recognizing again, this is how you'd be putting it back in there for trail. I used 100 grit, you might use an 80 grit, but you want to get all that glaze off of there. I'm going to go ahead and clean these up a little bit more. We'll put them all in like so. 2 springs, 2 pads. Now, if you're looking at this, you have the flat and the circular piece. Circular one's just holding there. The flat is what does the twist and the expansion. So we're going to set the springs in first. Basically building. These springs going easy. Sometimes it's not that easy with new. But what I find is I'll just, with my eye protection on, get them roughly situated and just bend them right in. Just like that. Now we've got to grease this bearing, and I have not adjusted my spline. Let's go ahead and do that. Here comes our Sharpie mark. And that's just going to help us make sure we go one spline and we don't lose track of where we are. Everything is so dirty. It doesn't come all the way off. There's a channel in here so I can keep it on. And there it is. If you look close, I am off by just 1 to the outside. This is why the Sharpie mark is so important, because it'd be hard to keep track of otherwise. Now, as you're doing this, you want to pay attention to the lobe within the hub here, and I'll show you, because that's why it's 1 spine, not 2. So if you go out 2 splines on there, you might start expanding your shoes out and you won't be able to get your hub back on. So pay attention right here that this is still flat. There's just a tiny touch of twist here. We're going to test fit our hub and make sure we can still get it on. I'm actually carb cleaning these bearings just to do the best I can to take care of what we have here. You can just see how much that pains my OCD, those bearings. We're gonna pack the heck out of those so they'll hold up. Pack this bearing from the back as well. Let's see if this will fit over with that 1 spline out. There we go. Just barely dragging. That's going to be perfect, and recognize as well that we have all of the play left on our handlebars and the springs out here. This is going to be a great setup. So let's get our locking bolt back in on the splines. We'll get the wheel in on this side. I'll repeat the other side, and then I'll show you adjusting so everything has the pull we're looking for. There is, and I didn't show this on camera, but as a part of this inner hub, there is a seal that sits on this hub that this inner collar slides into. To help keep the grease and grime away from the brake pads. So when you put on the locking castle nut here, you don't want to clamp down too tight. You don't want to put extra friction on the rotor, but get it so there isn't any play. Line it up and get your cotter pin, and then lock it in. All right, I'm going to do the other side. All right, almost there. Sliding my cotter pin in, and this side was missing a cotter pin. Always make sure that's the last thing you want to have bump out on the trail. But then I just saw somewhere in here, yeah, down in there. This one's done with a zip tie. You can do that. It's not the best solution. We're going to replace that with a cotter pin, but also look at this tie rod. See that up there? There's a booger weld and a lot of play. That snaps on you on the trail. That can get you hurt if you're going fast. So I will actually do something about that. that tie rod. But I've seen that, called it out now. I'm going to replace that other cotter pin, get the wheels on, and let me show you how to finish dialing in these front brakes so you can actually stop. All right, we are spinning, and we have all of our options for play adjustment. We're all the way in, and we can come out. And remember in the beginning of the video here, these were cranked all the way in. What we're going to do now is one by one, we're going to adjust to just a touch of drag. In this case, probably about we're going for the drag, and I am looking for, it's coming, my neutral position on each wheel. Now I'm clamping off camera the lever, the brake lever, as you can see. And I can still, with the brake lever clamped, I'm still getting through. Bring it in a little more. That's pretty good there. One. I bet you I can get. Okay, I got drag. I can feel it there. I'm gonna back it off. So what I've done is I have continued to adjust that wheel in till I could just feel the drag, and then I came off, you know, it's one half, one turn there, get back to free spinning. Because after I do the other wheel, and the reason I'm doing each wheel independently with that spin is each cable might stretch out a little more than another. So my right front's dialed in. I'm gonna do the same on the left. And then we're gonna come in, we're gonna take the last of our slack out up here. And then whenever you feel like your brakes are getting soft in the future, this is where you'll be able to adjust. This will be your main adjustment. Now, if you look closely, just by eyeballing how much I had to come in on this side, which is almost all the way, and this side, I didn't have to come in nearly as much to get that drag. And that's because the cables have worn at different lengths. Now, recognizing how far I came in, and it's not the one that I came in a whole bunch on, but the shortest one, I might have been able to go 2 splines on that adjustment. I went one, and often after one, it's to the point that I can't get the outer part of the hub back on over the brakes, and that's really what defines it. If you can get that on at 2 splines, you're good, because if you can get it on, you can get it off. I might have been able to get 2 splines, and then I wouldn't have to adjust each of the wheels in as far, and I'd have more room to adjust for those pads. Also, speak those pads, there was a lot of pad left. Biggest thing was just lack of maintenance on here. Everything was just glossed right over. So now for the end of this guy here. Now, I'll call out one more thing, is oiling cables, and even brand new cables. You should take them out and get your choice of lubricant down in, even brand new cables. Of all the places, cables are something you really want to take care of, whether it's your clutch cable, your throttle cable, if you have brake cables, you don't want those binding up. Throttle cable binds up, you could have a real wreck. Brake cables, you'll wear your brakes faster if they're not returning, or just poor performance. Clutch as well, you want to be able to feel. So cable maintenance as you're going through, lube your cables. In this case, we didn't do it today, but we would take the slack out, and then we could pull this out of its seat. See, line up the channel here, take it out, down, and then once I'm holding this up, I can do a bottle cap method or buy a Motion Pro type tool to push fluid down in there. So now, taking out slack, lock it in, And it may not look like a lot there, but we have almost a centimeter left of adjustment. And that is a whole lot of cable adjustment. And even as I crank on here, I'm not even into the bar. And I have more if I'm panic braking. And if you've done this well, taking up that cable slack, should be off dragging, wheels spinning. And when you crank on your brakes, I can't turn that one. There it is. So before I was all the way in holding and I was spinning it basically just like that. And same for your other side. If you have this side adjusted well, and see I've got a little bit there. We're gonna come in another turn on this side. Remember, this one wasn't as adjusted as much as the other one. A whole lot more. It's gonna be 1/2. Maybe 1. Still spinning. 1 more half, and we're gonna call it. That's it. So I hope you found that one helpful. Little different video. We didn't go through new parts. We didn't put in new springs. We didn't put in new shoes, other than my little side adventure to do a little bit of cleanup in my my bead blaster there, which is more for me. Really what needed to be done there, we needed to take all the glaze off those shoes and off those hubs. Very important. Sandpaper, I did 100, use an 80. Get that all done so there's something to grip. Those were between mud and whatever else was in there. It was like trying to brake on grease. Wasn't going to do anything for you. The other thing is getting that cable slack readjusted. And the big one in there was, well, that spline. There's the secret right there that a lot of people don't realize or don't talk about. Getting that spline adjustment. Use the Sharpie so you don't mess it up. And get in there, get 1, maybe 2 splines. In this case, this cable stretched enough. I think that I could have done 2 splines. Then you get all that cable adjustment back in the same way as if it was a new cable. So get that glaze off and get that cable adjustment right. Adjust your wheels for just that touch of drag, back them off, and then adjust them both at the same time through that central threaded adjustment up on the handlebars, and then you're good to go. So hopefully you enjoyed that one. Again, a little different than the usual teardown I do. But again, we're just trying to get this junkyard up and running, trying not to spend the money. That's a no money fix, from no brakes to those brakes are probably I'll dare say as good as these cable pulls ever were coming from the factory. But that'll stop you.